Hi, my name's Dan Keane from Spitfire Audio. Whether you're using samples throughout a whole project or you're lucky enough to just write with them but then record the parts live, you might occasionally find from time to time that it lacks a bit of a cinematic flair. Well, to celebrate the Pro edition of our Spitfire Symphony Orchestra and to show you how I get over this issue, I've written a short piece which I'm going to play to you first, and then I'm going to give you 5 tips to take away with you. In a word, I'd say the Pro edition of SSO is control, more of that beautiful hall at Air Studios, but with a much, much finer control over instrumental balances. Just to quickly take you through the differences between Core and Pro, in the Core edition, you've got your 3 kind of standard mic arrays: close, tree above the conductor's podium, and ambient. And this is a great triple threat for composers. Pro takes you that step further by adding the super wide outrigger microphones, the alternative mics, which are the close ribbon, stereo, gallery, and leader mics, in addition to the 3 stylized mixes by Jake Jackson: fine, medium, and broad. And these can help to limit how much RAM you're using without having to compromise on the mic options available. So in this demo, I've basically split my project into live and additional layers. And basically, I guess you could see this as being the parts that I'd actually record live in the hall if I got the chance to. And then this would be my kind of cinematic flair, my little kind of sprinkles on top. The main reason I've done this though is because I didn't want to overfill the track. And so to help kind of carve out some space, I'm using a compressor that's side-chained to my live elements. So as the live stuff gets louder, it slightly pulls out some of the volume of these additional layers. So you can hear it's not by much, 1 or 2 dB if that, but it helps just to give a little bit more control without kind of overbearing the sound with those additional layers. You can see in my EQ, I'm also pulling down at 12K in the additional parts. So this doesn't kind of give too much high frequency focus to the additionals. It's more to kind of pad things out, just to make it that little bit more cinematic. Now, as we go through the project here, for the additional parts, you'll see that for the most part, I'm using the alternative microphones, in particular the gallery, especially at the beginning. I think this is the magic of using samples, to be able to say, I'm going to take that one line and record it up an octave, right up in the gods, for example. So let's just have a quick listen to this middle section, and I'm going to play just the lives on their own, and then I'm going to add the additionals, and you'll be able to see what it adds. So there's quite a lot going on under the surface, but I hope you'll agree that it's those little 1% that help to make a bigger difference overall. Now, I mentioned those 5 tips at the beginning. The first one is a simple duplication of a part that you might like, that you want to give a little bit more texture to. So I had this first violin line. And I thought that sounded nice, but I wanted to add a little bit more depth to it. So I grabbed the soltasto violin ones and I took this part from the gallery. Now it's subtle, but it helps to give a little bit more texture, helps blur the lines a little bit, and it helps to support those legato transitions. It's worth finding combinations of articulations that you like. For example, for me, I really like the sound of the violin 1 soltasto with the harmonics an octave above. You've got the richness of the soltastos with that sort of upper edge sheen of the harmonics. Tip number 2 is just to experiment with filling out the harmony a little bit, taking that melody down an octave, flipping the stereo image a little bit, soft chords under the surface. If I play you this bit here, these are the violas and the cello. Again, this isn't about making the piece sound busier, and it's certainly not a louder equals better practice, but I think it helps just to add a little bit of life by filling in the gaps in places. Tip number 3 is a whole conversation of its own, really, and that is to use scale to add drama. So you'll see here that in my live elements, I've got these 3 auxiliary tracks: stereo, close ribbon, and gallery. And if I click on one of my tracks, you'll see in the mixer here that I've actually got 3 instances, as it were, of contact with each layer. So basically, this is a multi-output instance of contact, and that means that we can route each of the mics out to separate buses, and this means that we can treat them differently, we can add different amounts of EQ and reverb and things like that to it, but we can also control the group volume with buses. And so in the slightly more vulnerable moments, you can see that I'm pulling up on the close ribbon microphones, and then when it gets a little bit louder towards this middle section, I'm pulling that down and adding more of the gallery to give a bigger sense of weight, bigger sense of the room. So you can see for the most part, I'm using the stereo mic at a pretty consistent volume throughout, and I'm using the close ribbon and the gallery more just to kind of give a little bit more space perhaps, or get a little bit more intimate. Tip 4 is to add a little bit more momentum to your track with the use of these little short brush strokes. So in my additional layers here, this came a little bit later in the process, but I just decided that without any kind of sense of pulse, I didn't really know what tempo we were at. If I just mute this. So again, nothing too overbearing, didn't want it to be too strong, but fortunately, the Symphonic Strings has these really nice little short brushed with the consordino as well. So really, really gentle. You'll also see here that I'm changing the tempo quite regularly, and this is just to sort of make it a little bit more kind of dramatic, I suppose. Generally, if something feels quite vulnerable, I might kind of speed up the tempo if it feels a little bit kind of desperate. If something feels a bit grander, I'll tend to slow things down. It's all really to personal taste, but I find that little subtle changes can just make your music a little bit more musical, a little bit more cinematic. Tip number 5 is to use articulations that could be delegated to samples to help kind of fill out the spaces a little bit. So in general, I would say things like col legno, pizzicato, tremolo from time to time can all be used with the samples if the live elements are going to be your more kind of exposed legato passages, for example. That just about wraps it up for this video. If you did find it to be useful, please click like and subscribe if you haven't done already. Lots of really, really exciting things coming soon. And if you want to be notified the next time we put a video up, hit that little bell icon. See you again soon.